Welcome back to the Un-Holier podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Smith. Today's episode is a powerful one. I'm sitting down with my guest, Jeremy, who grew up in the 80s and 90s inside a cult led by a man named Ariel Ben Sherman. From a very young age, Jeremy's world was shaped by control, fear, and belief systems that no child should ever have to navigate. But this episode isn't just about what was taken from him. It's about what he's doing now. As an adult, Jeremy has found ways to channel his trauma into something meaningful and deeply human. Through painting large-scale murals and now writing a book about his experience, he's reclaiming his voice and telling his story on his own terms. This conversation is raw, reflective, and ultimately creative. It's about survival, memory, and what it looks like to turn pain into art. I'm really honored to share Jeremy's story with you today. So let's get started. I am excited to talk to you about your upbringing in this particular cult, which we'll get into, and kind of what brought you out of that cult. And then what you're doing now is super inspiring. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and then we can get into what cult you were in.
My name is Jeremy Paskell. I'm from everywhere. I was born here in Arizona and lived in California and Texas and California and Oregon and Massachusetts. And then, most people are like automatically assume you're like a military brat or something. And then depending on the conversation, I can just say, well, my dad just liked to move a lot. Or if I want to get into it, I can just be like, oh yeah, I was born into a religious cult. We traveled around the country. And
Yeah.
at that point, people can be like, whoa, 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 hold on, wait a minute, you were what? Or they're just like, oh, that's crazy. I've never met anyone born in a cult before.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I'm sure you've had some interesting conversations when you've said that. If people are intrigued, they're like, wait, what?
yeah. And and like I guess in my past, like when I was younger and stuff, it was just sort of like, oh, people are interested in hearing about this. Okay, well, I guess there's a good topic to, talk about. And, you know, I I guess I never really leaned into the trauma of what it was like to be born into that cult, have all those things happen to me. It was just more of like, oh yeah, this is just a fun story I'm telling. And so yeah, I would
Mm-hmm.
just tell people about my experiences. Maybe I wouldn't go too in depth about all the crazy punishments and stuff unless they really wanted to like hear about it or they were like a close friend or I mean, I still have friends to this day that are, I've known for 30 years and they're just now finding out I was raised in a cult. So I don't always just tell everybody I meet.
Yeah, and I can imagine some of the conversations you've had with even strangers that have asked, oh, where are you from or whatever, and then if you decide to say like, hey, I was raised in this religious cult, they're like, what? And I know a lot of people they have an idea of what they think a cult is. There's a lot of different, images I think people have in their head, and the
Right.
one that I hear from people all the time is like, oh, so you grew up like a Satanist? And I'm like, no, that's not. I mean, there's so many different cults, and I would
Right.
consider the cult I was raised in a very covert cult. So from the outside looking in, people would probably say that's not really a cult. But a lot of cults are very covert from an outsider's perspective. They don't know what's really going on behind closed doors. They would be like, oh, those people are normal. Maybe they dress a little weird or, they're very
Yeah.
close knit group of people, but they don't think anything of it. And then once you dive deeper, it's like, yeah, that's definitely a cult. I Googled the cult that you were raised in. So for the listeners, could you explain the cult, the name of the cult, and then where, if you know, like where it was founded and all of that?
Yeah, it was called the New Life Tabernacle. I think we were also called the Christian Cloud Retreat at one point. I believe the cult leader changed the names several times while I was in it from the time that I was born, because I was born into the cult in 1975. And it had originated out in Massachusetts from what we've so my dad joined it in about 1973, I believe, and that was in, I believe, Middleborough, Massachusetts. I've a lot more information has come to me since I've started writing this book that I'm writing about growing up in the cult. I've interviewed my dad, I've interviewed other cult members and stuff, so I've gotten a lot more information than I originally knew. when I was a kid, all I knew is that, yeah, my dad was from Massachusetts, moved across the country. I was born in Arizona. The cult leader, Ariel Ben Sherman, he started the cult, I believe it was maybe the late 60s, 68, something like that. And at that point, he only had like a few followers. And then, of course, he grew. And I think at some point, the highest amount of followers we had was over 100 people, maybe 150.
Okay. So how would he recruit people? Would he go door to door like a lot of these religious cults do, or would he just recruit certain families and then those families would recruit for him and so on and so forth?
Yeah, people would find out through other people. Like, I think my dad found out about it because he picked up a teenage hitchhiker in Massachusetts. And I believe she might have mentioned something about the church. And then my dad was like, oh, that sounds cool. A younger preacher, and then the guy goes to meet him. The guy's got tattoos. He, like, has this whole sort of very macho kind of personality, not like your typical old gray haired preacher guy that you normally see back then. And I think people gravitated towards that. And, then he had all these stories about being in the mafia, and then he used to be a hitman for the mafia, and like all these stories. And who knows if any of those were true or not? Probably not, because he lied about a bunch of other things.
Was he trying to convert people to like Christianity or like his version of Christianity? Like, was he preaching Christ?
He preached right out of the Bible, but I think like
Mhm.
anybody that has that going on, they're going to change
Mhm.
verbiage, they're going to move things around and manipulate it more to his, what he wanted. And a lot of people that recruited already were either Christians or had a belief in the Bible. And so he would tell them, like, you can have your belief and you can have your strong conviction with God, but if you really want to know what God is thinking, you're going to have to come through me because I have a special connection to God. And so come to me, but still pray. He would like do things and I guess maybe perform some kind of things that people be like, oh, wow, I've never seen anyone ever do that before. He must be talking to God.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, like, in their eyes, a miracle would be what take
Some
place.
sort of miracle, or maybe there was like sleep deprivation that was happening. And so people would hallucinate a little bit. I mean, that was like one of the things, one of the punishments was like sleep deprivation. And he also used spies. He had a few people that were just below him that he would have go around and like put their ears up to people's doors to listen to conversations that the couples were having at night. And then he would call in the couple and he would
Wow.
pretend that God came and gave him a message and he wanted to help them with whatever problem they were going through. And that made their conviction even more.
So, did everyone live on a compound?
When my dad joined, I believe they were living in separate houses. I think my dad had an apartment. He may have been living with one of the generals that Ariel had beneath him.
And by generals, was this like a person that would be like a spy? The person, like the
Well,
kind of person that would listen into the conversations and make sure people were in line
well,
with the
if like
teaching?
Ariel was like the CEO of the company, like these people would be like directly beneath him or below him. So if he was to travel or go somewhere, they would be left in charge. They made the decision making. Sometimes they were in charge of like the money, the finances. Yeah, because he liked to travel a bunch. And if you're a
Mm.
cult leader and you travel, well, you've got to have somebody that's also just as crazy or scary as you. And so I just call him like a general because this guy was like a general. We had a nickname for a lot of people, and we called him Joe Fish.
Mm.
And he just was like a big, kind of high-tempered, big burly man, So
Yeah.
he didn't want to cross that guy. And my dad crossed him at one point, and the guy ended up throwing all my dad's stuff out on the lawn, like kicked them out of the cult. And that was just for my dad wanting to go to his own dad's funeral. And he was instructed that, leave the dead where they lay, quoting from like the Bible, like, I'm your spiritual father now. And my dad was like 20 years old when his dad died. So he was still a kid himself. And then to
Hmm.
be told, like, you can't even go to your own dad's funeral. And he's like, I'm going to my dad's funeral. Like, come on. Like, and
Hmm.
because of that, they kicked him out of the cult. And that should have been a red flag for my dad to like be like, okay, that's not God. I'm not going back to that. But then I think they're about 2 weeks out from leaving Massachusetts and moving to Apache Junction, Arizona, where I was born. And so my dad went back and, said, "Hey, I don't want to be kicked out. I want to go with you guys. We're so close to leaving." And yeah, I let my dad back in the cult with my dad, my mom, and my older sister, who was just a baby at the time.
Wow. So then you guys left and your family left and went to Arizona, and then you were born.
Correct.
And then how long from the time you were born to the time you got out of the cult? How many years was that?
I was 9 years old when we got out.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay. So were you allowed to go to school or did they have like just schooling there or was there no schooling?
yeah, we were homeschooled, but it was mostly Bible, maybe some reading, some writing. Obviously, reading because we're reading the Bible. Writing, maybe a little bit of math stuff, but not really. I don't think it was until about 82, 83, maybe at this point. We were living in California in an apartment complex, and there were some teenagers who were just during the day would be out and about. And I think the truancy officer would come by and be like, "Why are those kids out here? They should be in school."
Yeah.
So the state came by and was like, "All right, so we got a little commune here. These are teenagers, and in California, you can't homeschool teenagers. Like they need to be in school. There's stuff they're learning you're not going to be able to teach them."
Right.
And so at that point, us younger kids, I do remember having to sit down more and do more class stuff. And that was like the first time I ever heard of like George Washington and like history stuff where I was
Oh,
thoroughly
wow.
confused at this point. So I was like, wait, did George Washington know Jesus? Like,
Oh, yeah.
because all we did was study the Bible pretty much.
So is that when you had like a realization as a teenager, like maybe the way I was raised wasn't the way that other people I know were raised? Like it's not the same as the outside world.
Yeah, I mean, when I became a teenager, I was at this point, I was still like 7, 8 years old. So us younger kids didn't have to go to school. It was just there was some teenagers in that part that did have to go to school, and they'd get in fights. People make fun of them. It was just they didn't fit in because they all of a sudden here they are, new kid in school and living like very east of LA, and so there's a lot of problems and issues there.
Yeah, I can imagine. How did being raised in this cult shape your sense of identity growing up? Did it make you struggle as a teenager into your adulthood, or were you able to kind of deconstruct pretty quickly and say the way I was raised wasn't normal and I'm gonna find my way at this point, or did you struggle
Yeah,
initially?
I definitely struggled because I had like we didn't have any counseling. I didn't go to any therapy. Didn't understand what was even going on. All I know is one day I'm living this life with this group of people that I've known my entire life,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden the cops are there. There's a raid. Kids are getting taken away.
Mm-hmm.
I'm there for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden I'm being taken away without my dad being there, and then taken to the police department, being interviewed. Then a woman shows up and is like, "Oh, this is your mom. You're going home with her." And I'm like, "What?" And so I was just thrown into a foster care system.
So
And
it wasn't your mom then.
well, no, they were just like, "This is the person you're going home with, like your foster mom." Like,
Oh my
this is your yeah.
gosh.
And I was like, "Wait, what?"
And
And
you're
that was
9.
yeah. At this point, I was 9 years old. So, and like, I don't know, we can get more into that. I don't know if you want to hear a little bit more about like, because there's a lot that happened in like Arizona. So yeah, so we moved. There was some sort of situation where I think Ariel was married a bunch of times throughout that 9 years that I was in the cult.
You know
And
what's funny is when you said he traveled a lot, I thought to myself, he probably has multiple families like around the US. He probably traveled and like had all kinds of stuff going
I
on
mean,
nobody knew about.
he definitely had a lot of dealings going on. I mean, I think when he was the cult leader, he was the cult leader. And when he was on the road, he could literally be anybody he wanted to be.
Right.
He drove the
And who
newest,
would know? Who would
yeah,
even know? They
exactly.
didn't have social media or
No,
anything back then, so he could just totally
yeah.
be a different person.
Yeah. I mean, he would drive the newest car. He'd always wear like fancy rings, smell good, nice outfits. So yeah, I mean, living driving across country, he could just say he's anybody or he could be anything, and and then use that to swindle money out of people, say, oh, I'm doing this. And, he was a con man. So, yeah, who
Mm-hmm.
knows what he was doing. And at some point, he did split the cult up. His idea was to have like a group in Texas, a group in Florida, a group in Oregon, a group in California. So then he could just be like all the way going back and forth all the time on the road.
Mm.
In Arizona, we were told when we're moving across the country that we're moving into a trailer park that was already set up. Almost the entire trailer park was going to be ours. We were told that all the trailers were new, they're going to be furnished, everything was going to be set up. We get there, and like half the trailers are not even on the slabs. None of them are hooked up to water, power, anything like that. I think
Mm.
we're sometime into the spring of 75, so it's getting warm, and people that showed up had to go out in the desert and find furniture and couches and tables that people had just gone out and dumped and gotten rid of, and they would go out there and they would shake them out and kick them and make sure they weren't like spiders and
Scorpions?
scorpions, exactly.
Oh my
Rattlesnakes,
God.
and so they were like furnishing all these trailers with all this stuff they were finding. And then, of course, like the one trailer that was hooked up and had AC, that was the cult leader's trailer. So we took over most of the entire trailer park. And then at some point, the Boston Globe actually flew a private investigator out to follow us because I guess we'd already been causing a bit of a stir in Massachusetts. And so they paid someone to go out there just to be like, hey, keep tabs on these guys, like see what they're doing, because like
Oh,
they're up to
wow.
something.
Yeah.
And that may be like how like the dealerships found us, because before we knew it, cars were starting to get repossessed, even trailers. And at one point, a tow truck driver came by and hooked up one of the small trailers. I guess it had all of our food in it. And all the women surrounded this tow truck driver and were banging on his hood and like telling him to stop and like, hey, that's got all our food for our kids. Like, you can't take that. And then I think my dad jumped up there with a hacksaw and was like starting to cut the cable of the like tow truck. And then someone came out with a gun and fired into the air. And then at that point, the tow truck driver was like, yeah, this is not worth it. Unhook it. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Because we had guns, and after that
Sure.
incident, we did start having armed guards at the front of the trailer park, um, to deter any other repossessions from happening.
And
So,
what was the cult leader's explanation? Was he like, we're being persecuted?
oh yeah, always, and
Yeah,
yeah,
of course.
yeah, this is persecution, or like, oh, maybe the payment, because like the money that everybody would go out and work for would come back and go to him, and then it would
Mm.
get divvied out, and it was supposed to be you pay the bills, you pay off your car payments, blah blah. Well, I think he was spending that money, whether he was gambling
Oh.
with it. I mean, he was living a very lavish lifestyle. He was eating at nice fancy restaurants and, like I said, having the nicest cars and nice clothes and all the nicest equipment for back in the day, big TVs, things like that.
Mm.
So that costs a lot of money to live that lifestyle. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so that was what's going on there. At some point, the city came by to turn off the water, and I guess Ariel had met some. I don't know if he was like a lawyer. He was somebody had a lot of money in town, and he brought him by the trailer park one day and said, "Look what I'm building here. Look what I'm trying to create. Look at all these kids playing and having fun. And look at over there. There's the city. They're about to turn this water off." He originally asked the guy for like $1,800, and then by the time they left the trailer park and got to the bank, he had agreed to give him $10,000. Like it went from 1,800 to 10,000. He convinced them that he had a piece of property still in Massachusetts that was about to sell, and that was why they're having money issues, because they were waiting for it. It was just about to go through, and he
Mm.
just needed some money until it went through. And then he was going to give the guy back money plus interest. And then I don't know, like a week or two later, he went back to the lawyer again. Was like, "Hey, I need another 15,000." And at
Oh,
that
wow.
point, he was like, "All right, hold on a second. Like, let me do some digging first." Makes some
Hmm.
phone calls, realizes that the property isn't even in his name. He doesn't own it. It's not his. And at that point, he realizes, crap, I've been had by this guy.
Whose name was the property in?
I wasn't in the cult leader's name. He said it was. it was someone else's property that we were probably renting or living on or something. And so he had
Oh,
enough information about the property, to show like, oh, well, look, this is the piece of property. And so he must have given
mhm.
him the actual property or something. And, but
Wow.
yeah, so that was a lot of the things that he would do. He would con people out of their life savings, out of their GI Bill, like just anything. If people had money, sometimes they'd even like offer it up, like, hey, I just got this money and it might not even been that much. And they'd be like, I want you and God to have it. And they would give it over to him. And
Of course.
so, yeah.
Because where your treasure is, there your heart is, and
Right, right, right.
you
Yeah.
lay your treasures in heaven and
Well,
not here
God
on
needs
earth.
money, right? How does he run heaven
Right.
without all that money,
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
he's got to have those gold paved streets, so
exactly. That costs a lot of money.
we are paying for it, apparently.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I always wondered that. It's like, why does God need our money? If
Right.
he's got like a mansion and heaven is like gold streets and a pearly gate and walls of jasper and all these things, like, doesn't make any sense. Make it make sense.
And that's what pisses me off about all these like mega preachers and stuff. Like, well, I have to have a jet and I have to have these homes so that
Oh
when I
yeah.
go there, okay, but why can't you have a simple home in that neighborhood? Why can't you go stay with one of the people you preach to? Like, why like pretty sure in the Bible it doesn't talk about Jesus like having these palaces all around the Middle East
Exactly.
they had to stay in. He didn't have like a gold chariot bringing him around. It's
Right.
like, come on, you guys are full of shit.
I know. I
So,
wonder, yeah, Jesus didn't have a private jet or Paul didn't have a private jet.
yeah.
I know it's like you ever see that clip of Kenneth is his name Kenneth Coleman? Kenneth
Mm.
Copeland.
Oh God, is that scary freaking preacher
Yes,
guy? Yeah,
Kenneth
yeah, that's what I'm
Copeland,
talking about.
where
Yeah.
yeah, where he's like, I gotta have my own jet, my own private jet, and the interviewer was like, well, you said you didn't want to get into a tube full of demons
Oh my God.
on an airplane, and he's like, I never said that, and she's like, well, I have a
Right.
quote here that says you did.
Yeah. No, I've seen that. And he's like getting in his truck and he's just like the way he's talking, the way he looks. I'm like, he's demonic. He's definitely a
He
demon. Like he's straight
right,
up a demon. Like you can't tell me he's not. Like
right,
I've seen some of the sermons and things he does on TV, and I'm like, you just cut your hand and you just cut someone else's hand and you
yes,
like squeezed into a cup and you drank it. Like, how
I
fucking
know,
demonic are you? Like, are
I
you kidding me right
know.
now?
And they're
Like,
doing it in front of everyone, and these people
yeah,
are buying this bullshit. And I'm
right.
like, this is a cult, right? Like
Yeah,
they're making like a covenant together,
yeah,
this is a ritual that they're
yeah,
doing.
yeah,
And you guys are all like,
yeah.
oh, praise God,
Oh
it's
my
like,
God.
oh my God.
Yeah, total insanity. But obviously, I mean, I was in that. I was,
Hmm.
we looked at Ariel like that. He could have done any of those things. We were like, oh wow, that's amazing. Because just when they've got you that convinced, you'll
Hmm.
do anything for them.
It's almost like it is a brainwashing, but it's almost like you're under like some kind of like I don't want to get like conspiracy theory or anything, but like, they talk about like the government's had like a brain mind control programs like
Right,
MK
right.
Ultra and stuff like it's almost like the same type of thing where you're just like almost under this like hypnosis and no
Right.
one can tell you any differently. Like you could be shown
Hmm.
this guy is taking your money and doing this, that, and the
Right.
other thing with it. And the people would be like, but he probably has a good reason. God probably told him to do this. Like, if
Yeah.
we trust him.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really crazy how cults operate, isn't it? And then when you get out, you're like, oh my gosh, like
Right.
why are these people believing this? But if you were in one at one point, especially if you're born in one, like I was born in one, so I never knew any different. Like this was
Same
my
here.
whole
Yeah.
life. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
didn't know any different until I deconstructed. It took, I would say, at least a decade. I'm still deconstructing some of this stuff. Like, and I'm 20 years removed from it.
Okay.
And
Wow.
there's still things that I'm like, and my husband will check me every now and then. I'll make a statement about something or I'll say, well, I don't really agree with that. And he'll be like, well, you need to ask yourself, is that you saying that or is that the cult mentality you had that you still have a little bit of? It's that residue, right? That I call residue. It's
Yeah.
like it's still a little bit there. And I have to check myself and say, why am I judging this person right now? Like, do I really
Right.
believe that they're doing the wrong thing, or is it just like my cult upbringing that was telling me that?
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy. I don't know when you started deconstructing, but yeah, it's definitely a process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was in that first foster home, I remember talking to some kids. I don't remember how long I'd been in the foster home before, but I definitely remember still praising him and talking to them and being like, oh, you haven't heard of this man? Like, he's the savior. Like, he's gonna come back and he's gonna grab me, and then we're gonna go, and like, I'm gonna be saved. I'm gonna go up to heaven with Jesus. Like, that was
Yeah.
still in that first foster home, and the first foster home I got into was a Mormon foster home, and so immediately I'm
Oh
taken out of
gosh.
this cult and dropped into this foster home that's a Mormon cult, like a Mormon church, and then
Yeah, I mean, you went
you
from one
know,
cult to another cult. It's
yeah,
cool.
and like I mean, like I don't know, there's I know that like the people were really kind. They were really kind. I think they had
That's
really good
good.
hearts. I think the guy was the preacher of that particular church. I still talk to them this day. Like I actually just had my author call them and interview them about when I went into their home and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I mean, I have respect for them, but yeah, I do
Yeah.
believe that there is definitely even a lot of different religions where there are kind, nice people that are in it, and there are people that are
Hmm.
like, "Yep, this." I mean, yeah, it's. I think most religions today are all just some form of a cult.
I agree.
Um, I believe if you want to have a connection to God or Jesus, you don't need to go to a church. You don't need to
Hmm.
go to a building. You don't need to be around anyone except for yourself. If you want to be
Hmm.
close to God or your maker, whoever it is, the universe, go sit under a tree. Take your shoes off. Put your feet in the grass. You want to
Yep.
be close to God? Look at a butterfly. Boom, you're there. Like that's it.
Hmm.
You don't need any of this stuff. You don't need to go give money to nobody. You don't need to go in. Like I said, the fancier the building, run, get out of there. You know.
Right. Yeah, I
So that's
totally
my take
agree.
on it.
Yep. Yep. I'm totally with you on that. So you got out, now you're in this foster home. Did this Mormon family make you go to temple with them?
I did.
Or
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so did you have to convert to Mormonism at that point?
I didn't have to convert, but I like had to do the things that all the other kids were doing. Like the kids would go up and they'd make them go up onto the stand and with the mic and tell them what they were thankful for. It was always like, I'm thankful for my mom, and I'm thankful for my dad, and I'm thankful for Jesus. And they would like go sit back down, and I think they made
Hmm.
me go up there and do that. And I was like, it's just like I don't just
Yeah,
repeat what the other kids said, you know.
did you have to say something like, I'm thankful for Joseph Smith and the blah, 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 you
Yeah,
know,
maybe. I mean, yeah,
that
I
was like
remember.
part of it that you had to add to your being thankful for thing? Because I interviewed a Mormon on here once who has left the church, and she would say the same thing. She also told me that they had to do these baptisms for the dead.
Oh, okay.
Did you ever have to do that? Were you getting like the white outfit?
I don't think so. I don't remember.
Okay.
And I think there may have been at some point I may have told them like I don't want to go to your church or something. And I feel like there were times where I could stay home if I wanted to or
Oh,
something.
okay. So they were like, cool. Yeah.
I Yeah, I don't. I just remember like it was like Sundays, and on Sundays you weren't allowed to get gas, you weren't allowed to drink coffee, or you weren't allowed to like turn on things. You couldn't watch TV, you couldn't turn certain electrical thing. On Sundays were like you could not do hardly anything. You had to make sure everything was all prepped and ready to go.
Stop.
Drive to church, but that was it. So
Right.
I remember like sitting at home one time and I was just like, am I going to get in trouble if I turn the TV on? I want to watch a show. And I was like, well, I'm not supposed to because I'm in their home. And I like was like really wanting to watch the show. And I remember, I think I just was like, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
So I was trying to respect them, but
Yeah. So you were there for how long? And were you there by yourself or did your sister go with you?
no. So that was kind of messed up because they did put some of the kids that they took together. They should have put myself and my sister and myself together, and they didn't. They put her in a different home. And I think she may have gone to two different homes, and like she's a year younger than me, so I just turned 50 this year, so she's like 49, and I was at that point I was 9, she was 8, and they put her in a different home, and then she just like clammed up. She didn't talk, she didn't say anything to anybody. They thought she was mute, deaf. They thought something was wrong with her. She was just in
Oh,
shock, you know, and like
yeah.
and so I think it was like one of the police officers from the department had an extra spot in his home. And so he's like, hey, I've got a younger daughter about the same age. Like I was there during the raid, and that helped her a lot. Within, like, I would say within like a few months or something of being in that home, she finally came around, started talking and stuff, and opened up more.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, so when you guys got taken from the compound or the trailer park, I'm gonna call it a compound because you guys were all living in the same place,
yeah,
essentially. When you guys were taken, were you mad at the law enforcement at the time or the people that took you? Were you like,
yes,
what are you doing?
yeah,
Like that taking away from my parents, from my family, the people I knew, my home,
yeah,
all those things. But now as an adult, you're able to look back and say, well, they did the right thing. They were protecting us. It
correct, yeah,
didn't seem like that as a child, of course, because you're like, why would you remove me from my mom and dad, you know?
right, right.
I'm so glad that it worked out for you though in that foster home because there's so many people that I interview that do end up in foster homes. They're taken out of the cult, end up in a foster home, and it doesn't work out well for them.
And
Um,
there were other kids that didn't have a good experience. I actually went to
yeah.
two foster care homes. The first one was with the Mormons, and they were very kind to me. And the second foster home I went to, they were kind for like the first week or two, and then they just started being assholes. Like they were just, yeah, doing things, and just, it was like at some point I realized, I'm like, wait a minute, I was taken away from my family because I was being treated badly, and
Mm-hmm.
now I'm with the family that's treating me badly. This isn't okay. And
Yeah.
but just to kind of backtrack a little bit, so we
Mm-hmm.
lived in Arizona when I was a baby. About 2 weeks after that, we moved out of the trailer park, went to some apartments. I think part of the group went to Oregon to try to like establish like a camp, some kind of campgrounds up there, and that didn't work out. And then from that part of California, from Arizona, we moved to California, and that's where my little sister was born, was in California. And then after that, we moved to Sherman, Texas. We lived at the Woodman Circle. We were there until about 81 or so, and then we moved to Rialto, San Bernardino, Rancho Cucamonga, California. And
Well,
then we left there in 83, 84. I think it was 84, and moved to Salem, Oregon. And so Salem, Oregon is where the raid happened. And that was in 1984, just to give you kind of an idea of like the
okay.
different places that we were living in. So that way it's not like too confusing.
Do you feel like he had moved a lot because Ariel was thinking they're on to him?
Yeah, I believe it was that, but it was also his track record with not paying his bills.
Mm-hmm.
So with the trailer park, we defaulted on car loans, we defaulted on the trailer loans, and at some point they're like, "You guys, you're so behind on everything, like you can't even catch up at this point." And
Yeah.
so then, yeah, I moved into some apartments. I think he was trying to like get more money from different people. Like I said, the people in the group would have normal jobs, and so they would go out and they would work. Like we didn't all just like live on the compound and that was it. Like we had to make money. So people would go out and get normal jobs, and of course then they would tell their coworkers like, "Hey, blah blah," and come check out what we're doing here. And that's how they would recruit people. Was it wasn't really Ariel so much going out and doing it. It was all the followers who would be so happy with life and things are amazing and so close to God, and this is why, and live with all these people, and we got all these women that stay home, and some go to work, but the ones that stay home take care of the kids so the men can go work and bring money back. And then there was some businesses, I believe in Sherman, Texas. We owned a car wash, or part owned of a car wash or something, so we had money coming in from that. A lot of the men that were in the group were tradesmen. So we had
Yeah.
carpenters, electricians, plumbers. We had, retired army medics, things like that. So like we had people that knew how to go out and do things and could easily bring home good money doing the trade works.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, so we moved a bunch because I believe we were mostly defaulting on our payments. And that was the main thing that happened. Even in Sherman, Texas, we lived in an old orphanage called the Woodman Circle, and that house could easily fit 200 people. It was massive, massive
Wow.
old orphanage, had multiple buildings on the property. The main house, I don't even know, it was huge. We had a cafeteria style kitchen, dining room,
Wow.
full basement, two, three levels. We had our own gas pumps. We had 18 wheelers sometimes coming and bringing food and gas and stuff to the compound. And
Wow.
that place we were also renting, maybe with the option to buy. When we got there, the place had been, I think, abandoned for about 10 years. So it was a little bit in disarray. And my dad remembers night and day just working on that house, like bringing it back to its glory, like just everything from the plumbing to the electrical, the carpentry. I always remember there being some kind of construction zone going on in that house.
And how old were you when you were there?
So that's my first memories is in Sherman, Texas at the Woodman Circle. My first memories are like 2.5 years old because I have pictures that my dad have showed me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that day. I remember that day was the day we went down to the pond, and it was just my dad, my mom, and my two sisters, and it was like the first day that I ever felt like we just hung out as a family because that wasn't encouraged. And very vivid memories of that day. And I looked at the photo, and it was like summer of like '78 or something. I was like, oh, I was like 2.5 years old then. And so we moved there. I believe it was like 77, 78. We're there until about 81, 82, something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of my, that's like my origin story. That's where like I always thought that I was from because that was all my memories was like just
Mm-hmm.
being in this big, massive house on this big property. We could run around. We were closed off from the rest of the community. There were people in town that were thinking we were a satanic cult because we did keep pretty private to ourselves. And everyone that lived in Sherman, Texas knew the Woodman Circle. They either worked there, they had family members that were there, or they grew up there. A place for orphans. So when they turned 18, they could leave the Woodman Circle. And so a lot of people remembered it as being a good, positive place. And then we got there and it was like, whoa, who is this group of people? They're very private. People started to come on the property. We would chase them off. I remember seeing young kids on motorcycles ripping across our front lawn. And then I'd see one of the cult members jump in a van and like race across the lawn and like chase them off the property. At some point, the younger kids with their cars would come around at nighttime and they would like rip through like the driveway because the way it was set up, there was like a big horseshoe driveway.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would like race through. And so at some point we ended up putting down like spike strips. So like when they drove in, they pop all their tires, they'd be like, oh crap, okay, this isn't worth it. And they would leave and they wouldn't come back.
Yeah. So the community knew, but was it super small community there or was it
Yeah, I
pretty
mean Sherman, Texas
populated?
in the 80s, I think it was a fairly small town. I think even now it's not like a city.
Mm-hmm.
You can look on the map.
Yeah. This is
Okay.
giving me like Branch Davidian vibes, totally.
Yeah, I mean,
But on a smaller scale.
yeah, and then, I mean, this house, we did have a shooting range in the basement, and people did go down there and practice and shoot guns and stuff. And had there been a situation there, we probably could have stood our ground because it was built like a fortress. It was massive brick house, and we had the high ground. It was like up on a hill, and had there been a situation, we could have easily turned into a Waco situation. And I think
Mm-hmm.
people would have taken up arms against it because he always told us that the police and everyone else were sinners and evil. And at some point, they were going to try to come and take us. And, we were all going to ascend to heaven. And anyone that wasn't in our group was all going to be gnashing their teeth in a lake of fire. And we were going to
Oh,
go up to
oh,
heaven all by like so I thought, wow, this is incredible, like I'm a part of this group that's chosen. And as a kid that's what you're told, and so that's what you think. And I think even now with a lot of kids growing up in just normal families that are Christian and they're being told certain things, like they can't make up their own mind until they leave their home and they get away from their families and they're like, oh, okay, the world's a little bit different than they've told me, but okay.
yeah. It's like, yeah, the world is pretty great. Yet there are some evil people out there for sure, but a lot of the evil people are right where you were in the
Yeah,
church. It's like they're
yeah,
there, they're in the church, they're, wolves in sheep's clothing. And
correct,
I think
very
that's what
true.
people don't understand. It's like, a lot of the evil in the world is perpetrated by these cults. And
Right.
it's not only like the abuse that you deal with, but then when you get out, you realize you have like religious trauma then that you have to process and deal with. And I know even for me, I mean, there's still things that upset me to this day. I deal with fear. I worry a lot. Those
Mhm.
are things that have stuck with me that I've really had to work through. Do you feel like you have experienced any of that as an adult?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely always like battling with fear and anxiety and just get to a point where I'm like, you know what, it's all out of my control. It's either going to happen or it's not. I can
Yeah.
sit here and I can make up all these stories about how it's going to go bad, or I can sit here and make up stories about how it's going to go good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just life. Like, I mean, I think we tell ourselves this narrative like, oh, okay, it's gonna go bad or all those things, and then it's like phone rings and all of a sudden someone's like, hey, you're hired, you got the job, and you're like, wow, I've just been sitting here for 2 days like thinking that it wasn't gonna happen, and then all of a sudden it
Mm-hmm.
did happen, and so I wasted all that time leaning into that, and
Yeah.
so
Were you ever taught like if something bad happens to you that's God's punishment or his judgment on you, you must have done something wrong to deserve it?
yeah, in the cult for sure. Yeah, I mean, we were told that we were liars, we were born sinners, and I'm like, like, what do you mean? I'm just a kid. I'm not lying. I wasn't sinning. Like, what? What did I
Right.
do? So yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear that. I was talking to a friend the other day and they were like, "Oh yeah, in our church, if a baby was crying in the service, that the preacher would call it out and be like, "See, even from birth you're a sinner."
Oh my
It's
God.
like the baby can't talk, so it's crying and that's how it knows how
That's
to communicate, and
normal,
that's a
normal
sin.
be yeah, normal behavior. Oh yeah. That was one of the things he liked to do was during his sermons is like he would like have a list of people that he would just call out in front of everybody for the things that they
Wow.
did wrong and how they messed up and how they sinned and how they should repent. Like, yeah.
Wow, so he would just call it out in front of everyone. Like
Yep.
so and so are
Yep. You've
whatever.
done this, you've sinned, you've fallen from grace, da da. And if anyone ever like got wise and was like, "You're bad, you're a cult leader, I'm out of here," then
Hmm.
they had fallen from grace and they had turned to the dark side, and the devil had come for them, and that's why they left. And
Yeah, painted a narrative like that person was bad. Not that person woke up and was like, "This is effed up.
right,
I'm leaving."
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're not who you say you are, and
Yeah.
this is not in the Bible, and you're a piece of shit. And
Yeah.
you're like, oh no, like you're just fallen, and you're going to hell now, and you're
Yeah. So
so.
did the cult leader ever have like a wife or women? Did he have a
Multiple
partner?
wives. Yeah.
Okay. Why
Yeah.
is that?
And
That's just,
not,
it's okay for them to just do whatever, right?
yeah, I mean, and it wasn't like he was married to like five women at the same time. He would marry, they would to break up, divorce, he'd marry another person, and definitely was like running around sleeping with whoever would sleep with him and exposing himself. I mean, there was a point in Texas where a woman that my dad was dating, the cult leader exposed himself to her and she was not about it. She went back to my dad crying, telling him what happened, and my dad like didn't want to believe it. He's like, I don't want to believe like that happened. I can't believe that he would do that. And instead of going and confronting the guy and knocking him out for what he did, he
Yeah.
just was like, yeah, I don't think that happened. I don't want to believe it, because once again he was so brainwashed that even though someone's sitting there telling him to his face like, hey, this thing happened, and my dad just like not wanting to believe it and then just didn't do anything about it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so many stories like that though, like where people just don't want to believe it and
Yep.
then they don't do anything. And I mean, there's a lot of regret that happens after you
Right.
leave and all of that, but I'm I would love to talk about how you finally got out. And what age were you when you finally got out of course, you're out of the cult within the confines of the compound, and you're in this foster home. So after
Right.
that, are you out or do you go back? Are you still in contact with people in the cult? Are you still like considering yourself in this religion, or do you just never go back after you get out of the foster home?
So when I was in the second foster home, my school that I was going to was like the fourth grade. That school was about a quarter mile away from the compound in West Salem. And one
Hmm.
day after school, I just decided to like walk up there and say hi to people because there were still people living there. There were still very few kids or still some adults. And I just showed up one day and I was like, hey guys. And they're like, whoa, what are you doing here? Like, you're, what? And I was like, oh, I just decided to come by and say hi. And like, I was in there like, you can't be here. You're going to get us in trouble or something, you know? And I think
Were
I
your
ended up
parents there?
I think my dad may have been at work that day, but there were
Okay.
some other people that were there and maybe a couple of kids, like maybe my sister may have been there. And but that's how I was. Like when I was in the first foster home, I remembered my dad picking up hitchhikers when we used to live down in California. And one day after school, I said, the school bus is that way, but the road I want to go is that way. And so I went the other way. I'm 9 years old in the third grade, and I decided I wanted to try hitchhiking to go home. And I lived about 4 miles from the Mormon foster home from where the school was. And I was like, I'm just going to hitchhike. I want to experience this, you know, and probably walked about halfway home until an older gentleman pulled over in like an older pickup truck and was like, "Hey, what are you doing? Where are you going?" I was like, "Oh, I'm just going up the road here." And so he's like, "All right, we'll hop in." And luckily I got into a truck with someone that was kind of nice because I was just
Yeah.
a small kid, like in the middle of nowhere, Oregon. And he dropped me off. It was a long, maybe a half-mile long driveway to go all the way up to where their house was. He's like, "Oh, well," he's like, "why don't I just drop you off at your house? Like, you don't need to walk the rest of the way." And I was like, "Okay." And I think he did that because he wanted to see where I was so he could be like,
Hmm.
hey, wait a minute. And he recognized the house as the preacher in town. And he came back later and was like, hey, I just want to let you guys know I picked this kid up hitchhiking today and dropped him off here. And they're like, Jeremy, like, why didn't you take the school bus? And I was like, well, I just wanted to hitchhike. And they're like, you can't do that. I was like, okay. So I was, I think once I got taste of freedom
Hmm.
that I started to explore it because when we were in that cult, like we couldn't even go more than like a foot off the property without getting in trouble. We could never go anywhere by ourselves. We were always with all the other kids. We were always with the adults. And so now all of a sudden I'm in this first foster home and they're telling me like, hey, it's Saturday. It's nice out. Why don't you go take the bike in the garage and go ride into town? And I'm like, town's 4 miles away. You're telling me I can hop on that bike as a 9 year old and I can go ride into town and no one's gonna follow me? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay. And I was gone, just
Yeah.
like, and that was like, I still remember that moment of just like ultimate freedom and like, wow, I could literally ride this bike anywhere. I could just go and like, it was like the first time that it ever actually been just by myself and like it seemed like this like epic journey at the time and I just rode around town. I was hanging out in town for a while and at some point I'm like, okay, I guess I gotta ride home and I rode back to the house. But
Wow. So that was your first real taste of freedom at that point. As you got older, did your sense of freedom change any?
no, no, it took off like wildfire. Yeah, I have
Okay.
I have
That's
picked
good.
up, moved across the country when I was like 20 years old. I've gone to places, I've traveled different places in the world. I've just like, oh, I'm just gonna go and find out what happens.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So you almost have like a little bit of like it's now or never. I'm doing this. I don't care. Like you're almost like to heck with it. I'm just gonna see and it's an adventure and let's go.
yeah, and
Is
I'm a
that kind of your
survivor,
mindset?
and I'm a survivor. I like
Yeah.
people. I like talking to people. So
Hmm.
I can literally go anywhere in the world, and I guarantee you, I'll have a job and a place to live within the first day of landing wherever I go. Like
Hmm.
I just make that happen.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I love that you're able to talk about this, but also find positive things that came out of it. Bad experience, right? But you're able to say, this is a positive I was able to experience from getting out. And now I'm a very independent person. I'm a survivor. So I have, keen survival skills. I can make shit happen like that. you're just kind of in that mentality that you might not have gained otherwise had you not experienced what you did in your childhood, right?
Correct.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Of
yeah. Of course, it doesn't excuse what happened to you. I tell people all
course
the
not. Yeah.
time that, like, for me, for a long time, I was like, why did this happen to me? I did everything that I was supposed to do. I was a rule follower, even though it's like totally against my personality to be one. And it got me into a really bad abusive marriage because it was an arranged situation by my father. But now I'm out on the other side of it, divorced and remarried a wonderful person. But I look back and I say, I could look at that situation and I could focus on all the negative and be depressed and, all the things that come with it. But I decided to take my power back and say, how can I use this bad situation to help other people?
Right.
And that's really kind of what you're doing now. You have thrown yourself into your art, you travel, now you're writing this book. So I would love to talk about that. If you're
Mm.
ready to talk about it, we can. If you
Sure.
don't want to move on from the other, we can still talk about that. Totally up to you. But how did you get into art?
I believe I was born with it because is from the earliest memories that I have. You gave me a pencil, you gave me a crayon. I was scribbling, I was drawing, I was mostly drawing biblical scenery. And then I started drawing cars. I was like, oh, I want that. I want that Pontiac Firebird. And I would just draw on a piece of paper and cut it out. And then I would play with it. When I
Hmm.
was in the foster home, I wanted like a toy truck. And so I took a bunch of styrofoam egg cartons and I cut it apart and I taped it all back together and I made a toy truck out of an egg carton, just like so I just remember drawing ever since I was a kid. My dad, I saw him doing some paintings and some drawings and stuff, and so then I was like, "Wow, I want to do that too." I like how that turned out, and I would draw, and he would always support me in that. It was always like, "Oh, wow, that's so good. That's so great. That's such a beautiful drawing. That's so nice," or really good at that. And so I've got
Hmm.
that encouragement, and that pushed me to draw even more, even through like my teenage years when I would draw like knives sticking into hearts and ribbons and whatever things. You'd be like, wow, that's really great. That's so cool. And I would draw more stuff. And I've always had people encouraging me, even in like the sixth grade, my art teacher and the principal coming to class one day and just being like, hey, we know you don't have a lot of money, but we see that you're drawing on every single homework assignment that you've got. You draw on
Yeah.
everything. It pisses off some of the teachers and some of the teachers like it. So here's a whole bunch of art supplies. They
Cool.
gave me, in front of the entire class. They're like, here's markers, here's paper, here's pencils, crayons. I was just like, oh my God, wow, this is incredible. And so that encouraged me to keep going and keep making art. And then in like high school, now I'm the art teacher's assistant and I'm helping other kids draw. And at this point, I could look at someone's face and I could draw it exactly by looking at them. Like I could draw it exactly all proportional. And yeah, so I'm just,
Wow, that's really cool. And now you do murals,
yeah,
correct? You
murals on buildings. I put stuff on, clothes. The murals that I do, I want that to inspire the younger generation. So I put good positive words in there. I use bright colors and I do really fun things. And yeah.
and you do that with spray paint or
Uh,
you do it
Off
with
anything, but yeah,
anything? Yeah.
mostly, I mean, yeah, spray paint, exterior house paint with rollers. It really just depends on the surface. It depends
Hmm.
on how big the art is. If there's a lot of one color and there's like big shapes, then I'm just going to use like roll-on paint because I would just burn through a whole lot of spray paint.
Hmm.
And so, like, if I'm going to put down a lot of big colors, then yeah, I roll it on. And then if I have smaller sections that aren't a whole lot of color, then I'll go back with spray cans and stuff because I can only go through I could go through like 2 or 3 cans versus like 25 cans.
Yeah. Do you feel like art has been really a therapy for you?
Yeah, art definitely has saved me a
Yeah.
bunch of times. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's become a therapy for you. How and what are some of the your favorite murals that you've done? Is there any inspiration from your childhood where you're like maybe there's a certain element that you put in every time just to kind of remind you where you came from and how you came out of it or
Yeah. So when I was living in that house in Sherman, Texas, one of the punishments was being put into a dark room.
Mm,
And I'm talking no light, no sound. The room itself was built to be a recording studio, so it was wall to wall carpet, ceiling was carpeted. I can still smell that smell
mm,
of fresh carpet. And so I was in this dark room for 6 to 8 hours, sometimes at a time. And sometimes I'd go to bed, I'd wake up the next morning, march me right back down to the dark room. And so I was in there with nothing but my mind. And it's like being put into like deprivation. And at the first like hour or two, I would cry my eyes out until there were no more tears. And then I'd be like, okay, let me walk around and feel the walls. And I knew exactly, okay, well, this wall's here, this wall's here, there's nothing else in here. And then I would just try to see things. It's absolutely dark. So I put my hand in front of my face and I'm like, okay, I don't even see that. I'm not seeing nothing. Like there's no light coming in at all. And so then I would try to like just conjure up visuals or just whatever, like look at the little weird red like fractals that you see when you close your eyes, because it's never just
mm-hmm.
black, right? It's like almost like
Yeah.
this muted kind of weird darkish color with things. And so a lot of that has come out in my art. Like I do like to draw on black paper using gel pens. I've often tried to recreate what I saw in that dark room. And
Mm.
so, yeah, it was a punishment at the time. And when I tell people about that, it's horrible. But for me, I feel like it did activate some sort of level of imagination that I would not have maybe had if I was born in a different time or wasn't subjected to that hours and hours of just being alone by myself in the dark. So a lot of the murals, even the big murals, I do like to have a lot of black background with the color popping off that black because it really does pop out.
Do you have a favorite mural that you've done?
I mean, they're all my favorite. Like,
Yeah. They're all
I
like
mean,
your
like,
babies, right?
yeah, like even like the first one I did was like 2018 in Reno, Nevada. That one I didn't use as much black in, but I did put a lot of fractals, a lot of like 90-degree angle, sort of three-dimensional stuff kind of floating out at towards you perspective. And I went back there recently this for my birthday and it's still there. So yeah, and then I did a mural here in Pontiac, Michigan, and that was my largest one that I've done here. And I did put some good words of encouragement in there, like evolve and elevate and create. And I'm hoping that inspires someone. I hope someone sees that and they're like, oh, wow, I can evolve and elevate and I can create. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm all about putting those positive words out into the universe. So I love
Yeah.
that. But now you're writing a book about your experience in the cult. Tell us a little bit about that. And also, where can we find it and when will it be available?
I'm not sure. I'm hoping that it won't be more than like another year or two before it comes out.
Hmm.
I met this nice couple and I offered to do a mural in their home. And as I was talking to my friend, he mentioned I think I briefly started talking about my past or growing up in the cult, and that I at some point may have interest in writing a book about it. And he said, "Well, my wife, like she's a writing coach. Maybe she could help you write your book." And after a few minutes of speaking with her, I was like, oh, wait, so, but you want to be an author. How about instead of you helping me write this book, why don't you just write it for me and you can interview me and you can interview my dad, my sisters, and like you just write the book. And turns out she's an investigative journalist.
Hmm.
So she has access to every newspaper article ever written in the entire, world, the country. And she's been able to find newspaper articles that I didn't even know existed regarding the cult leader, regarding these dealings. Like she was the one that found out about the story of the money that he took in Arizona, and because that story made the paper. And so she
Hmm.
found that. She's found all kinds of other articles. We've sent out a FOIA request to the FBI because they have files on him. So we're trying to get those files. And yeah, she's doing an incredible job. So I've reached out to all my family members. We've reached out to past the other cult members, cult survivors, some of the kids from the cult. We've had hours and hours of interviews with a lot of other people, and even reconnecting with the cult leader's son and his stepdaughter, which I never thought that was ever going to happen. and found out a lot of information that was very vital to the book that I would not have ever known if we hadn't reached out to them.
So are you finding each other on social media, or how are
Yeah,
people
mostly.
connecting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone, you're right now, everyone's like, doing like exactly, social media stuff. My dad was really good at keeping in touch with a lot of the past members. And
Hmm.
then they were like, oh, yeah, I still know where this person is, or oh, I'm still in contact with that person.
Hmm.
And I've tried to reach out to some of the kids that were taken into foster care the same time I was, and they want nothing to do with this. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but you're going to either see this, you're going to read about it one day, or it's going to be
Hmm.
on a streaming service. Because my ultimate goal for this story is to be made into an actual film. Because I just feel like it needs to be. I feel like this story needs to be portrayed into some kind of a film, whether it's a documentary style or it's an actual movie with famous actors playing the parts.
Hmm.
So, and
Yeah.
you know, and I wanted
Well,
to help people. Like I want my book to help people. And I think originally when I first thought about writing it was like more about the wow factor of everything and how it all went down. And then as I started getting into it, I was like, no, I want this to like help people so they can read it and they can understand the mind of a narcissistic cult leader. They can
mhm.
understand the signs, and hopefully this will help somebody or help people, or
Are you hoping, of course, you want it to help survivors, right? But are you also hoping that maybe it will, people who don't understand cult dynamics yet or who are stuck in a cult
yeah,
will
hopefully, yeah.
reach them too?
Yep.
Yeah. I love that. That is one of the reasons why I do this podcast. Of course, I do it to help, survivors and to give people a platform to tell their story. But I also want people who are stuck in the cult to listen and hear these survivor stories and be like, oh, I can totally see like this person was in the same position that I am right now. And this is
Right.
how they got out, and this is what happened. And now their life is way better.
Yeah.
You know? But well, I'm excited for your book, especially from that point of view, from the journalist point of view, where she's able to take it from that kind of a standpoint, and then there's interviewing the different people too. Um,
Right.
I'm interested too, like what now is your relationship with your family? It sounds like you talk to them now and you guys are able to kind of openly talk about what happened.
Yeah, so I can talk with my dad very openly. He understands that he messed up. Like he knows that he was manipulated and brainwashed. And so I have a very close relationship with my dad.
Hmm.
When I was taken away and put into foster care, a lot of parents did turn state's evidence because they knew that they weren't going to get their kids back unless they did that. And other parents, such as my dad, went on like a year-long crusade to drive around California and Oregon and try to find newspaper articles to prove that the cult leader was that he was who he said he was, that he was, a man of God, and none of this stuff
Hmm.
happened. And my dad would go down to California and would meet with the lawyer of the cult leader, and nobody knew who the cult leader was because he went on the run. Because just so a day after the cops raided our compound, all of a sudden God needed him to go on a mission,
Of
and
course.
he called together a whole group of people and was like, okay, but this has to be your decision too. And it's like he'd already made up his mind. He was going. He already
Yeah,
had his bags packed, but he wanted to make it seem like they're like, yeah, you should probably go. So that way, like, you can still like fight this, but from afar and not in a jail cell. But while other adults and family members or parents were getting arrested and put in jail. And so he just boop, fucking skipped town. And it wasn't shortly after that when all of a sudden the FBI was like, oh, this guy's on the run. We need to go try to find him. And I don't know if they looked very hard because I feel like from where I found out where he actually was, I'm like they probably could have found him if they really were looking. But
yeah. I
so
I think it would be an interesting documentary because it's just there's so many aspects of it,
yeah,
and the fact that he was traveling and all around the country and moving here and there and had all kinds of there was a lot of things going on there for sure.
yeah. And so we've been able to find all that stuff out. when we
Yeah.
were still living in Sherman, Texas. Half of the group did go to Florida, so he did accomplish that. They did start a little commune out there. So he was driving back
Wow.
and forth from Sherman to Florida, and we moved to Rialto, California, and then he was going between Rialto and Florida, and then at some point he came up to Florida and told everybody that he had this like spiritual experience, this total breakthrough, and then he had to share it with the rest of the group. But the catch was the only way that he could share what he experienced was that he would have to sleep with all the women of all the men, because that's how he was going to transfer it. That spiritual information was through intercourse. And I think that time most of the husbands were like, "You're out. You're no, no, we're
Okay, so that
done."
was the final thing that was
For
like,
the Florida group, correct.
okay, for the Florida group. Did he try it when he came back to Texas?
And no, at that point, I believe we had moved to Rialto. We were in California. I
Okay.
mean, I don't know. Must have been one of those weird things he had when he's driving across country. Maybe he sleep deprived himself, sleep deprived, and like driving and be like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna try this. They're totally gonna go for it." And he gets there and they're like, "Nope."
There are some cults where he would have been able to get away with that for sure, but
Sure.
yeah.
Maybe he was testing the waters
Yeah.
already and like, messing around with some of the wives. He was like, "Oh, okay, I think they'll be into it." And most of the men were like, "Yeah, no." And so I would say like 80% of those members all just like got out and like went and did their own thing. And then there was like 20% of the people that all of a sudden just showed up in Rialto that most of them I hadn't met because they were Florida people.
And they
And
followed him?
what's that? They
The
came
20% followed him?
from Florida. They came and they joined because they realized that there was no more group in Florida. Like he wasn't going to do that anymore. I think he realized he had to have more control. And in order to have that control, he needed to have everybody under one roof. And so the rest of the group from Florida that still was okay came out to California, and that's when like the punishments got worse. So
So
in
give me some
Texas, yeah.
example of like the punishments other than that you've got the isolation room, right?
Right, in
There's
Texas, we were there. That was the first thing I remember was like it was the dark room. It was either standing in the corner until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. You come out of the dark room, they would feed you stuff you didn't like. So I didn't like canned spinach. I don't know what kid does or even an adult likes canned spinach. And so I was forced to eat spinach, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. My
Mm.
sister didn't like, she couldn't eat dairy. She was lactose intolerant. So they fed her a grilled cheese sandwich and she literally just couldn't eat it. And I had to sit across the table and watch her eat this thing that I absolutely loved. And, it was like that kind of stuff. And
Wow.
then once we got to Rialto, it became almost like corporal punishments, right? Like this woman that hated kids somehow became our teacher, and she was like the Miss Hannigan, she would like go around and she'd hand us the ruler and be like, "Okay, like now either smack the back of your own hand or I'm going to smack your hand. You need to go stand on your head in the corner. You need to go stand on your head with your feet
Stand
on
on
the."
your head.
Oh yeah, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, yeah. We get soap put in our mouths.
Mm.
Sometimes the boys, like myself, would get put in dresses and go made to go outside and play with the other neighborhood kids.
My God.
We like sometimes weren't allowed to use the bathroom for hours until our parent got home, or
Wow.
yeah, I one time I remember having like liquid dishwasher soap. Had to drink a whole cap of that because I said something I wasn't supposed to say. I'm like, pretty sure that's poison control, like,
Oh my gosh.
territory. It's one thing to have
Y-
like a bar of soap, like
Yeah.
a little piece of that in your mouth and just until it dissolves. So yeah, there was just a lot of
Wow.
horrible things that she was doing, and she was just not a nice person. And then when we got up to Oregon, the reason why the cult was raided was because now we were being stuck not just in a dark room, but now we were being tied to rafters with our hands over our heads. There were kids being handcuffed in like abandoned pump houses. Some of us were sitting in empty swimming pool. We had a big pool, And we were excited to move to Oregon because we're like, cool, we get to have a swimming pool. And we get there and it's empty. And instead of water, it's full of kids. And when you
Oh,
got in trouble, you'd have to sit in a pool all day long. And the rule was you could go out there, but you had to wear whatever you're wearing. You couldn't take anything off and you couldn't put anything on. And now we're getting into kind of fall in Oregon, Northern Oregon. So I got smart and I started wearing my jacket out in the morning. And I would kind of roast a little bit during the day with the jacket. But when it got cold at night and you're sitting on a cement pool, 9, 10 o'clock at night, that jacket kept me warm. You weren't allowed to go to the bathroom. Kids were defecating in their pants. Then they would get hosed off at the end of the night with a garden hose outside, cold water. Just horrible shit, and like things that like 5-year olds were being put in the pool and, put in the dark room. Teenagers were being locked up, deprived of food. And at some point, when the teenagers, I think he just was like, I've had enough. I'm going to go get help. And so he ran away and went shoplifting, got caught on purpose. The cops interviewed him and thought he was just kind of making it up, was going to bring him home. And then I think once he really got into the story more, they're like, okay, hold on a second. We're going to bring you downtown. You're going to talk to these child protective service people. They're going to interview some more. And if they find it credible, then we're going to go and find out what's going on. At that point, that's when they just showed up and they swarmed the compound.
so that was the end of it.
Yeah, well, that was the end of that and Ariel's reign of terror. And like I said, he went on the run. Most of the kids went into foster care. People were still living on the compound. People were still trying to fight as much as they could.
Sure.
After about a year, my dad realized that the fight wasn't in his favor and that he wasn't going to get us kids back. Like we were going to turn 18 in foster care if he continued staying and fighting for Ariel. And so at some point, he came to me and was like, I can get you guys out of foster care, but I'm gonna have to like leave the cult. And I was like, you do whatever you have to do to get us away from
Mhm.
these people. Cause like I said, they were not treating me very kind in that second foster care. And I went to the child protective service people and I told them what was going on. And the foster parents were like yelling at me, telling them that I was lying, and I just lost my shit. And I just like screamed at them. And the foster care work or the child protective service was like, I've never seen Jeremy act this way. This is not okay. Like, I need to get him home. And at that point, I think my dad had already left the compound. And so
Mm.
they sped up the process and they got me back to my dad's house.
Oh my
So
gosh.
you had to cut ties with the cult, get a job, get your own place, prove that you weren't going to have any ties with the cult, and then you could get your kids back. And that's what happened.
Well, it sounds like your dad kind of woke up at that point and then he
Yeah,
really
it took them a while.
fought for you guys. Yeah. Thank God for that teenage boy, though. I mean, he was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, it sounds like.
I feel like somebody would have died. There definitely like somebody would have been malnourished, some kid, or I mean, anything could have happened. I mean, kids were being handcuffed, like I said, in like these like it was like a little pump house for the pool, and there was a couple of kids in there handcuffed in there, and other kids were tied, suspended from rafters in the dark room, and
Mm,
hardly the amount of food that you're supposed to have as a kid and teenager, and
wow.
yeah, and so. um I did reconnect with him and I did get a good interview with him. So like his story will be in the book and
That's awesome. I was going to ask that if you guys ever reconnected. Did
yeah.
he ever say, like, what motivated him? Was it just him being tired of living that way? He just was like, I'm gonna how did he get out? Like, this is what I'm thinking. Like, how did he get to the store? Did he escape the compound and get to the store and then decide he was going to shoplift? Because he was like, if I get
He just
arrested, then I can talk to a police officer.
yeah, like he just knew he needed to go get help. He knew he had to do something, like whether it was for himself or whatever.
Was he
He
like one of the oldest guys on one of the oldest kids on the property
no, but he
at
was
that
like
point?
he was the tallest kid. He was like
So he,
we called him T-Rex because he was so tall. He was just a tall, lanky teenager boy. And yeah, when I asked him, like, if he remembers what his mindset was, he did say that he remembered that he just knew that he needed to go get help. And I think that was what he knew. Like, if he just went and he did something he wasn't supposed to do, he was going to get in trouble, which was like shoplifting. And so maybe he knew the cops would show up.
Yeah.
Because I think he was just doing it right in front of the employees, just shoving stuff in his pocket. And they're like,
Yeah.
hold on, what are you doing? And
Yeah.
like, we're calling the cops, thinking he's just some like teenage kid just being a punk, whatever. And
That's super smart though of him to
right.
think about that. Um, I'm glad that you guys reconnected and his story will be in the book as well. Very cool that you and your dad have reconnected and that he is able to take responsibility and all of that. I think that's really inspiring, honestly. And it's sad because as a parent myself, I can't imagine being put in that situation as a parent. I just can't put my mind in that situation. But I know that as parents, we do the best that we can with the information we're given
Right.
and the way we were raised. So that's kind of like our template for, we're either going to be this kind of parent like my parent was, or we're going to be the total opposite of what my parent was. And we take that and we train and have our kids grow up that way in a way that we feel is right. So when they're older, it may not have been right for them, and we can carry a lot of, resentment on ourselves, guilt, shame, all of those things. But I'm glad that you and him were able to resolve it and get healing through that reconciliation
Yeah.
with each other. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I often tell people some of the videos that I made where, I'm like, as I'm telling this story and telling about these horrible things that happen, I'm like, please don't be mad at the parents because at that point they were teenager, young adults themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you can put yourself in the place of a 19, 20-year-old kid in 1973 with the knowledge and what you've had, you can't say like, oh, like, yeah, of course, me right now, I've got two younger daughters. I've got almost a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. I would never do that to them. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just, the thought of putting them into that kind of like a dark room or that type of environment. Yeah, I know because I went through it, I experienced it. I would never do that as a form of punishment, but back then that's what they thought had to happen. And the
Mm-hmm.
cult leader would always tell people like, this is for their salvation. If we don't do this, like, you're going to lose them, their souls are going to go to burn in hell. And also, if you leave, like, you're damning your soul to hell, but then not even your soul, but you're also damning now your kids soul to hell. So can you live with that, knowing that you're going to make your
Right.
kids suffer for eternity? And so a lot of
Mm-hmm.
parents would be like, well, crap, I guess I don't want that to happen. I guess I'll just stick this out and stay in this cult because it was a scare
Yeah.
tactic.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of them, to that point, a lot of them feel like, or they think, or are told by the cult leader that this punishment for your child is temporary.
Right.
So it's actually saving their soul, is
Correct. And
what
that's
they,
right. And that's what he
that's
was feeding people. And that's why the cult members would willingly go in there and install hooks in the ceiling and go in there and string the kids up by their wrist and put sleeping bags around them and tie ropes around them. Because these kids, at some point they're in the dark room. I think this particular dark room was also like a storage room. And so these kids were getting into boxes and taking things, and then like, okay, well, now we're going to tie you down to your bed, and they would wrap ropes around their bed, and then the kids would squirm out of the ropes. They said, okay, well, now we're going to hang you from the ceiling by your hands so you can't fucking escape, like.
wow. Wow, that is just, it's hard to imagine that kind of that level of cruelty, the thinking that goes into that. It's warped for sure. Wow. So, what advice would you give to someone who is still in like a highly controlled group, like a cult or something similar to a cult?
I'd say get the fuck out for one, and just know that there is help. Like, no matter what the cult leader is telling you or the people are telling you, and the most thing is going to be like, you can't make it out there on your own. You can't make it without us. You're going to be nothing. You're going to sin. You're going to, just get out, like, find help. People will help you. Like, there is
Yeah.
hope, like, don't believe all the crap. Like, they don't got it figured out. Like, I don't think any of us humans on this planet got it figured out. Like, we're all just making it up as we go along, and we're just hoping, a lot of us want to do the best that we can, and be kind people to each other, and hopefully in the end
Mhm.
it works out. We don't know. And
Mhm.
maybe we'll never know, and maybe we'll know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen when I die. It might just go black and that's it. There might be a universal consciousness. There might be a place like this might just be a body, and we might all be souls that are here experiencing whatever we're experiencing. And we die, we might go somewhere else. And through my life, I have looked into reincarnation, and there's a lot of convincing stories out there that this isn't it for us, or this isn't the first time, or maybe not be the last time. And
Mhm.
you hear all these stories about these kids that were like, obsessed with World War II planes and can't go near a fireplace, and then they start saying like, oh yeah, like I was a pilot, and they're like, what do you mean, you're 4 years old? And he goes, yeah, but I flew a plane. And he's like, what are you talking about? And these
Wow.
kids will start talking about their friends, and they'll come up with names, and then the parents kind of shrug it off, and then eventually they start researching, and they realize that the kid is actually talking about real people who died in a plane crash in the Pacific, and all those
Wow.
people died together, and all the names of those people that died together are the names the kid just mentioned. There's
Wow.
so many stories like that. So I'm like, okay, there's
Mhm.
something more here to life than
Mhm.
just we're born into a body, we die, and then that's it, we're gone.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, I guess we won't know until it happens, right?
Right, and that's it. But in the meantime, just be an honest, awesome person and
Mhm.
be kind to the kids, and that's like
Mhm.
one thing that being a new parent again, I had to realize is just like not keeping that generational trauma going. Like sometimes I would start to get triggered if they spilled some milk or food or something, or didn't want to eat their food. And I'd go back to my days of a kid when it was like, I didn't know if I was going to get a meal. I didn't know if I was going to eat the next day. And so I ate
Mhm.
everything on my plate. I ate the stuff that was on my dad's plate, my sister's plate. They told me I had a hollow leg when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, is that where all the food goes? Like, and so as I got older, I'm like, I had to realize, oh, wait a minute, it's okay. It's just milk. It's just water. If they don't want to finish their food, okay, when they're hungry, they will eat. Like I had to
Mhm.
and once I started reading, getting into like wanting to write this book, and then I talked to a friend of mine, he goes, well, you should probably go on social media and start talking about this. And then once I started doing that, I realized, oh crap, there's a lot of
Mhm.
trauma that I have not dealt with around this. Once I started like making these videos, and you can see it in the videos that I posted. Like if you go back and you kind of watch the progression of it, you can see some were more emotional than others. And at that point, I was like, oh, I need to talk to a therapist. I've never actually ever talked to a professional about
Mhm.
this. Like, I need to go get professional help. And also, I'm gonna go sober. I'm gonna stop drinking. Like, I wasn't drinking a lot, but I was like, I need to get through this. I just need to be clear-minded as possible and
Mhm.
just focus on the outcome and be there for my kiddos, be present. And since I started writing this book, I've gone through a divorce. Now my kiddos are not in the same house as me. And, so I've gone through a lot of emotional, crazy stuff just since
Mhm.
I've decided to write this book. And, now my little sister's diagnosed with cancer. And,
Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
so there's just like a
Sucks.
lot of, just like a
Mhm.
lot of things that are happening lately. And,
Mhm.
but I just know I just need to keep continuing to show up. And
Yeah.
I haven't been posting as much on social media just because I just had a lot of that stuff going on. I was like, just need to take a break. And then I know like with some social media, the algorithms are crazy. Like when I was posting before they changed stuff, I would get 20, 30 followers. I'd get over 1,000 views, and then all of a sudden it was like 200 views, and they were like this and
Mhm.
that, and like no followers. I'm like, what is going on? I'm just like, I don't know. So I still want to talk and get my story out there and stuff, but I figure maybe I'll just do the interviews and occasionally post videos online. But
Yeah.
I'm not trying to get like followers and stuff. I just want to get my story out there. And
Mhm. Absolutely.
and I'm meeting cool people like you, and I've met a few other
Aw.
people on here with podcasts as well. Like, hey, do you
Yeah.
want to come and talk about your experience? And if that is the way that I'm going to reach more people, and I'm going to tell them about my experience, and yeah, bad things are going to happen to us in our life, but we can either ask, why did that happen to me, or what can I learn from that? Right. And
Mhm.
that's where I am And I guess that's where I've always been like, what can I learn from that experience? It's just part of what made me who I am today. And so,
I love that. I appreciate you sharing your story and being vulnerable on here today with us. And I would love for people to be able to find you and to be able to find your book when it comes out, of course. So they need to find you on socials. Where can people find you on socials?
yeah, I mean, I've got that TikTok, which is, I don't know if you can post a link or anything.
Yeah,
It's
I can post a
like a,
link. Yep. Yep.
yeah, because it's I am art with my name, Jeremy Paskell, but I've got like some underscores in there. And then on like my Instagram is Green Fin Hawk, and that's the word green fin hawk, FINHAWK. And I post some of the stories on there, but it's mostly more of my art, that kind of stuff if they want to see that.
That's
And
awesome.
then the book, the name that I'm toying around with because it was called The Good Shepherd Tabernacle. I thought about calling the book The Bad Shepherd or The Bad Shepherd Tabernacle. There was a movie recently that came out called The Bad Shepherd, so I don't know if I'll be able to like title the book that or not. Or yeah, like because I mean he was definitely a wolf in sheep's clothes, and
Hmm.
like
Before we wrap up the episode, what does healing mean to you now? And what are you still discovering?
healing. I mean, yeah, I'm healing all the time. I'm
Hmm.
just I think for me, what helps me to heal is just to be present in every moment. In our daily life, we can just get so caught up with, oh, I got to get in the car and I got to drive here and I got to go here. And I gotta, like, okay,
Hmm.
but just stop for a second, and I'll do this like as I'm walking out to the car and I'll just like stop and just like look at the tree, look at the ground, look at the sky, and just take a moment to be like, wow, I'm alive. Like I'm here on planet Earth. This is crazy. Like just the odds that you and I are here talking to each other right now are like one in like trillions because the
Hmm.
fact that like just one human being alive on this planet, what it took for that to happen. So, I think a lot of people take for granted their whole experience and like, well, I got to go here and I have to go to job, make money. Okay, but like, just think about what it took for you to be here. How many people before you had to have their heart broken and love stories and
Yeah.
misconnections just to make you like think about what it took for you to meet your partner or your kids to be here and like one moment where you could have gone the other direction or turned
Mhm.
left and gone this way and that none of this would have happened, so like just being present in every day. And that's just kind of what I do that helps me to heal and just surround myself with good kind people and be kind to them as well and just make those phone calls and call your loved ones when you can and just tell them you love them, send people cards, send them letters, don't text, call, for one.
Mhm.
Like, why am I texting? I could just call him.
I'm hearing like being present. I'm hearing gratitude as well as like the underlying, like you're
Yeah,
just that you're grateful, and that is definitely a way to heal. And I'm also hearing you say, healing is a process, which it is. We talk about that all the time. It's not a destination that you arrive at, right? It's a
correct.
daily thing that you have to do, and you never really arrive at it, but it's just an evolution over time. And I love that you said that. Be present. And I think we could all learn something from that for sure. Is there anything else that you would like to say or share before we wrap up the episode?
Well, like for one, like healing isn't a straight line. For one, it's not like
Right.
trauma healing. It's trauma. Okay, I'm doing all these things, reading books, I'm listening to podcasts, and oh, I'm back here again. Okay, crap.
Right.
Okay, now I'm over here. Like, okay, I'm way up here. I'm feeling good. Oh, no, I'm way back down here again. It's like it's gonna be a constant till the day you die, just a zigzag back and forth. So give yourself credit, right? If you feel like you're like, oh, I was doing so good, and now I feel like I'm not. Just give yourself credit. It's okay. You know.
Yeah, because you
Um,
do have those moments where you might get triggered by something, or you'll have a trauma response to something and you're
right.
like, where is this coming from? I thought I
Right.
was okay.
Yeah. And immediately step outside of yourself and ask yourself why you're reacting that way. If you're in traffic and someone cuts you off, your first instinct is to want to like speed up and get around them and then cut them off or whatever. Like, no, no, no. Like, that's not going to help the situation. Like, you don't know
Hmm.
what their deal is. There may be a pregnant woman in the car. You know what I mean? You just never know.
Hmm.
Um, just react less and just be like, okay, cool. Like, go on with your bad self. I'm gonna do me. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
Yeah.
think also just spending more time in nature if you can, nowadays, like even myself, just like the amount of like easy instant, like easy access to like social media and like, oh, I could just sit here and I'll just look at what the rest of the world is doing. And at that moment, like, do I need to be on here? Or do I want to be on here? So maybe I should just go outside and just like remember the days when I didn't have a phone in my pocket. What did I
Mhm.
do then? What did I do? Like,
Yeah, that's such a good reminder because I say all the time, like, we weren't meant to have all this information and know what's going on across the world and the atrocities
all
happening in
times.
other countries. We were meant to be present in the space that we're in and the people
Right.
that we surround ourselves in with. And I think that can really be very overwhelming to have a phone and with social media and you're on there constantly and you're seeing what's going on in the news. And
God, it's
I
crazy. Yeah.
try to tell people like just kind of scale back if you can. And like you said, get out in nature, be with loved ones, be present. I think that really helps as far as healing and like mental health as well.
Mhm.
You know, yeah, I love that recommendation.
Yeah, just put your phone down more. If you're with family or you're with friends, don't have your phone in your hand. That's like it's such a thing to just have it. Or you sit down to dinner and everyone puts their phone on the table. No, no, no. Take that, put it somewhere
Put it away.
else. You
Yeah.
be in the moment, be present, and just
Yeah.
um,
And be thankful, be grateful for what you have in.
yeah, time you have because you just tomorrow's not promised, and
Mhm.
so like just every day, just think about it like there's someone who didn't wake up this morning who
Mhm.
had the exact same amount of responsibilities that you and I had, and they didn't wake up. They went to bed last night, and that was it.
Mhm.
There's people
Mhm.
who are going to go to bed tonight who aren't going to wake up tomorrow. So it's just once you start to realize that and you live in that environment, like, wow, okay, I'm alive right now in this moment. Let me sit here and feel what that's like. I feel
Mhm.
like we can slow time down because I do feel like there's a lot of talk about like how time seems like it's speeding up, and that's because
Mhm.
our minds aren't making as such deep memories anymore because we're not creating these intense memories of doing these things because now we're replacing it with being on the phone and stuff. So it's like it feels like, wow, why does time feel like it's speeding up? It's like, well, because you're not in the present moment anymore. You're all over the
Mhm.
place on your phone. Like,
That's
oh,
so true. Like I could be scrolling on my phone and the next thing I know, an hour's gone by and
oh,
it's like
easily. Yeah.
15 minutes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just wasted an hour. You
You
just get
could have
sucked into
been
it.
you could have been writing in a journal, you could have been drawing. I mean, yeah, I've got like my little journal right here, and I like, before I go to bed, I will try to write stuff. Wake up in the morning, write down your dreams, write down some
Mhm.
stuff. Just get some of the thoughts you wake up with right away and just get them out of your head, and then like go about your day. Don't
Mhm.
reach for your phone the first thing you wake up in the morning and start scrolling because your mind needs to process the waking up. Like,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah. I would love to have you come back as a guest when your book comes out and we talk about that a little bit more even. That would be amazing if you're willing to. I'd love
Yeah,
to have you back sometime.
yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, it was so good to have you on today, Jeremy. Thank you so much for taking the time
Cool.
to come on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you as well. I appreciate the interview.
I know conversations like this aren't easy. And the fact that Jeremy has taken what he went through and transformed it into art and now a book is incredibly powerful. Stories like Jeremy's matter not just because they expose the realities of growing up in high control groups, but because they show what resilience can look like on the other side. Healing is not linear, and it doesn't always come quietly. Sometimes it comes through art, through music, or just telling the truth out loud. To everyone listening, thank you for holding space for this conversation. If Jeremy's story resonated with you, I encourage you to follow his work and keep an eye out for his upcoming book. As always, take care of yourselves. Be gentle with your healing, and remember, you are not alone. Thank you for listening. Before we close out, I just want to share a quick reminder. The stories told on this podcast are personal experiences and perspectives. They're shared to create awareness and connection, not as medical, legal, or mental health advice. Some of the conversations here focus on abuse, trauma, and other heavy topics, so please take care of yourself while listening. It's always okay to pause, skip an episode, or step away if you need to. And if anything we talked about brings something up to you, we encourage you to reach out to a trusted professional or a support resource. You don't have to carry any of this alone. Thank you for listening.